Catholic Charities of Brooklyn and Queens is making sure senior citizens are prepared and safe for the winter storm. I'm Tim Harfman, and I'll have more.
The final goodbye to a fallen hero. NYPD Detective Brian Simonson's massive Christian burial is celebrated today. In just a few hours, Pope Francis will begin what could be the most important event of his papacy, the worldwide summit on clergy sex abuse. We have team coverage.
Is evangelization the latest to join a long list of things millennials are accused of killing? I'm Emily Druby, and that story is coming up.
They had extra cans of soup, vegetables, crackers, things like that.
Catholic Charities coming to the aid of senior citizens as a storm of snow and ice hits our area at this hour. Good evening, everyone. I'm Liz Faublas. Treacherous is how forecasters are describing the weather. Warnings are in place until at least 1 a.m. tomorrow. Brooklyn, Queens Catholic Charities is in action as seniors cope with the storm. Current News' Tim Harfman is at their senior center in Bayside. Tim.
Liz, throughout the diocese, centers like this one provide the elderly with warm shelter and a meal. But even if they weren't able to go outside their homes today, the senior citizens are prepared for the storm thanks to Catholic Charities.
Unfortunately, I'm going to have to cancel bingo. I'm very sorry.
Susan Hall's not calling bingo today at this senior center in Bayside, just in case the would-be players want to make it home before the storm gets too bad. But this Catholic Charities Center remains open, providing shelter and warm meals.
I'm not worried about it. I'm used to already all these little storms. I don't think it's going to be a big one. I'm hoping it's not.
With a fierce forecast of snow, sleet, and freezing rain in the city, many seniors had something to eat, then left early as a precaution.
When you see the snow coming down, people have a tendency to leave the center early because as you age, you're not willing to take as many risks as you did when you were younger.
Patricia Walton was one of them, using a bus provided by Catholic Charities.
I listen to the weather report every morning before I come, and depending on the weather, if it's going to snow, I put my boots on. If it's raining, I'll bring an umbrella, I'll put my raincoat on, so I always come prepared.
But some senior citizens weren't able to travel to the center at all. Catholic Charities didn't forget about them. The organization delivers thousands of meals to homebound residents every day, providing extra meals thanks to the city's Department for the Aging.
We made sure that we sent everyone a shelf-stable box of food just in case, so they had extra cans of soup, vegetables, crackers, things like that. And then for the snow, we made sure we delivered in advance.
But the interaction between the driver and the homebound resident may provide even more nourishment.
This driver might be the only person that they see every day, so we want to make sure it's a friendly visit as well as a check system, make sure they're okay, make sure that they have the food.
As of now, Catholic Charities plans on keeping centers open tomorrow during regular business hours. Senior citizens plan on being here.
I have extra food at home, and I live in an apartment building, so I don't have to worry about shoveling.
And if you or someone you know needs help from Catholic Charities of Brooklyn and Queens, they can call the headquarters at 718-722-6000 or go to ccbq.org. In Bayside, Queens, Tim Harfman, Currents News. Liz, back to you.
Thank you, Tim. A sea of blue packed into St. Rosalie's Catholic Church today to say their final goodbyes to Detective Brian Simonson. Thousands of mourners gathered for the funeral of the NYPD veteran who was killed by friendly fire during a robbery attempt in Queens last week. During an emotional eulogy, Simonson's partner recalled working alongside his true friend.
I've been Brian's partner in the 102 Detective Squad for the past 5 years. The 102 is a family, a brotherhood, and being partners with Brian was a family tradition.
During the funeral mass, NYPD Commissioner James O'Neill posthumously promoted Simonson to Detective First Class. The fallen detective is being laid to rest in his hometown of Jamesport on Long Island. He leaves behind his mother and wife, Leanne. The biggest meeting of the Francis pontificate is about to get underway. The summit he's convening to tackle the crisis of clergy sex abuse. Nearly 200 top Catholic churchmen from around the world are in Rome to take part. Today, survivors of abuse spoke out. Melissa Butts is standing by at the Vatican with an exclusive report.
survivors, and their stories of sexual abuse by clergy in the Catholic Church. 10 of these victims met today with Summit organizers telling their story of pain ahead of the meeting kickoff on Thursday. His story of sexual abuse is so famous, a movie was made about it, Spotlight. Phil Saviano says as an 11-year-old boy in Boston, he thought Father David Hawley's interest in him made him important until it went too far.
It was a tremendous sense of being trapped because I didn't know how to. He would corner me, and I would verbalize excuses like I'm going to be late for supper, or I have to get back to my paper, and he was not taking no for an answer.
He said the months that ensued were gruesome, but the worst part was seeing the priest in confession.
I went into confession and I said whatever my sins were, yelled at my mother or whatever, and then I said, and you know the rest. And there was silence coming from the other side of that screen.
In Vancouver, Canada, Leona Huggins also has a personal story of abuse beginning in 1974. She didn't realize the extent of it until taking a child abuse prevention course in the 90s.
I recognized that was what happened to me, and I discovered that he was starting a youth group where he would be working with children, and that concerned me, so I went to the police at much personal cost.
Coming out of their 3.5-hour meeting with the members of the Summit Organizing Committee, the victim said it was a positive meeting, but rules need to be enforced.
Raping a boy or a girl, or abusing vulnerable adults or vulnerable people has been wrong since the Middle Ages, in the 1st century, now, and it will be before. So that's not an excuse, and that needs to end.
Although we were told that the Pope wouldn't be there at this meeting, we were disappointed that he wasn't, because he called this summit. He said he wanted to make a difference.
I say, if there was ever a good time for transparency, now is it. But you have to give concrete signs that you really, you're coming up with a good plan to address this, and it can't be just talk.
But they also feel an intense responsibility.
We feel that we represent so many survivors from all over the world, and it's a heavy weight to have when you carry and you think of all those people that are counting on you to make a positive change.
After this encounter, the victims now believe the summit is an educational session for bishops to understand abuse instead of a meeting on enforcing zero tolerance. They told me a separate meeting was organized for Monday after the conclusion of the summit to create an action plan. The meeting will be with victims, the organizing committee, and upper-level Vatican staff. At the Vatican, Melissa Butts, Currents News. Back to you in New York, Liz.
One of the Vatican Abuse Summit's organizers is saying the code of silence must be broken because only the truth will set the church free. Joining us now to dig into what's on the summit's agenda is the world's top Vatican expert and the editor of Crux, John Allen. John, always such a pleasure to talk with you.
Hey, Liz, every time you call me the world's top Vatican expert, my heart skips a beat, so I will do this with you anytime you like.
We only speak the truth here, John. You know that's so genuine. And speaking of that, the summit, its focus, it's going to be on the abuse of children. What about vulnerable adults, John, seminarians, women religious who face abuse? Will that also be examined?
Yeah, this has all been in the era of late. Of course, the scandals surrounding former cardinal and now former priest Theodore McCarrick involved not simply the sexual abuse of children, but also the abuse of vulnerable adults. In his case, seminarians and young priests. Obviously, there has been a great deal of reporting also about the abuse of nuns recently by priests in various parts of the world. I mean, technically speaking, Liz, this is a summit on the protection of children.
Now, as you just mentioned, the big headline ahead of this summit, Theodore McCarrick stripped of his clerical collar. What impact will that McCarrick scandal have on the bishop's discussions? Will it play a part?
Well, I think inevitably it will play a part. Now, how much it is going to be a factor actually inside the meeting room when the bishops come together, we don't know. But certainly in the atmospheric surrounding it and the kinds of things you were likely to hear from victims and survivors this week, the McCarrick case is going to be huge because, the Vatican wanted to have the McCarrick case wrapped up and out of the way before this summit began. But the thing of it is, Liz, I think according to most survivors and victims, defrocking Theodore McCarrick is the beginning, not the end of that case. The end game is accountability not just for the crime, but for the cover-up. They want to know Who else knew about the behavior that McCarrick was engaged in? And how was he able to remain at the pinnacle of power in the Catholic Church for more than 2 decades, despite persistent rumors that he was engaged in this kind of misconduct?
John, big expectations for this summit. The Pope's top investigator into clerical sex abuse, Archbishop Charles Scicluna, pointing to this summit as the moment when the truth must be revealed. Let's listen.
This need to break any code of silence, any complicity with denial. And we have to face the facts, because only truth, the truth of the matter, the truth of the factual and confronting with the facts will make us free.
I only pose the hard questions to you, John Allen. Can the whole truth be revealed at this summit?
Short answer, Liz, no. This is a 3-day meeting, and you have people attending from all over the world with wildly different experiences of the clerical sexual abuse scandal, ranging from places such as the United States and Western Europe that have been living with this for decades, to sub-Saharan Africa, parts of Asia, parts of Latin America that have never dealt with this at all. So I think the expectations for these 3 days actually are fairly minimal. I think it's simply that everybody walk away understanding this is a problem and something needs to be done about it. The real critical element of all this, Liz, is going to be the follow-up. And that's something that places such as Currents and places such as Crux, we're going to need to continue to have our eyes on this. I think what we're going to get are some very impressive rhetorical commitments to reform. We're going to have to be watching to see whether those commitments are actually lived out in the weeks and months to come.
Do you think this event can bring about the changes that the church needs to combat, finally, this abuse crisis?
I think what this summit can do is make a commitment to bring about those changes, but that's going to happen at the local level, or it's not going to happen at all. The Vatican can do some things. For instance, it could tell us what it knew about McCarrick and when it knew it. That would be very helpful. But the real issue of holding accusers accountable and then ultimately holding bishops accountable for their handling of accusers, that's not something that can be solved exclusively in Rome, and that's not something that can be solved in 3 days. That's going to require some time, and I think the issue here is whether media and activists are going to continue to hold the church's feet to the fire even after Sunday when this summit wraps up.
John, always direct, always insightful. Thank you so much.
A pleasure, Liz.
Currents News will have team coverage of the Abuse Summit. In addition to John Allen, we'll have exclusive reports from national correspondent for The Tablet and Crux, Christopher White, beginning tomorrow at 7 p.m. On the eve of the summit, Pope Francis turned his attention this morning to those who accuse the church of, quote, defects. He said if accusations are made without love, they're linked with evil.
Chi è? Quello che la Bibbia chiama il grande accusatore, chi è? Non capisco, non sento bene. È il diavolo e coloro che si passano la vita accusando, sono, non dirò figli, no, perché il diavolo non ne ha, ma amici, cugini, parenti del diavolo, no? E no, questo non va.
Francis did add that defects in the church must be identified so that they can be corrected. Catholic bishops in Venezuela are calling for justice in the middle of the crisis tearing at the country. The clerics are blasting attacks on aid workers carried out by the regime's security forces. The bishops are demanding public prosecutors take action to stop the violence. Venezuela's ruler, Nicolas Maduro, is shutting off the country to the outside world. He's ordered land, air, and sea borders to be closed. He's acting to prevent aid from reaching the country's suffering citizens. A weekend deadline has been set by the opposition to let the relief enter Venezuela. Russia's president warning the U.S., telling the White House not to base new missiles in Europe, otherwise he'll target warheads at the U.S. Vladimir Putin delivered the ultimatum when he addressed Parliament this morning in his annual address. He surprised his audience by unveiling new nuclear weapons. There's a lot more news headed your way. We'll dig into new research that claims many millennials don't want to evangelize their Catholic faith. Catholic Relief Services is scrambling to help the people of Haiti as unrest rocks the country. The powerful stories of 3 religious women who are now revealing what they claim happened to them at the hands of predators. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@thesalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. A new study is out that finds Catholic millennials are increasingly uncomfortable at spreading their faith through evangelization. Currents News' Emily Drewby reports on the meaning behind the numbers.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee.
3 millennials praying together and then discussing their faith.
How do you combat a culture of relativism?
They live and spread their faith on a daily basis, but not all millennials feel the same way. According to a recent poll, the latest thing to join the millennial kill list is evangelization.
I believe that everybody has their own opinions about religion.
Everybody has different faiths, so they may not relate to your faith, so it's not really something to talk about.
Young people we spoke with seemed to agree with the study commissioned by the Christian evangelization group Alpha, where about half of millennials questioned had objections to sharing personal beliefs about faith with people of other religions in the hope of converting them. With other groups, the numbers are Gen X 27%, Boomers 19%, and Elders 20%. That same research says millennials are able to speak knowledgeably about their faith, so why don't they feel comfortable doing it? Diego Araujo, a Brooklyn youth and young adult minister, thinks it could be from the culture of tolerance millennials grew up in.
We don't infringe on others' freedoms. We don't want to offend anyone. And it's that sensitivity that has led people to tiptoe around their faith. They themselves might have a very secure relationship with Jesus Christ, but they would be hesitant to share it. But I bet if they have a new workout routine or they found a new keto diet, they'll be more than happy to social media it everywhere.
Youth minister Kathleen Woods believes it's a different issue.
Not that they fear it, but they don't express interest in it. They don't want to take the time to deepen their relationship with God, and I think that's quite difficult when it's the one and true basic thing that we need today.
While Paul Morisi, the director of youth and young adult faith formation for the Diocese of Brooklyn, doesn't see the research numbers supported in the actions of millennials.
I think it's quite the opposite. I think a lot of our lifeblood and our faith is coming from our millennials, our young adults that are now in the workforce, that are spreading the gospel to those that they work with.
Morisi adding it's the job of dioceses and parishes to encourage people through faith formation programs to know their faith and speak about it. Liz?
All right, Emily, thank you very much for that. Catholic Relief Services is working hard tonight to aid Haitians who've been rocked by violent demonstrations in the country. When the unrest was at its worst about a week ago, many of the CRS workers fled for safety. Now they're back to help. The protests are aimed at high inflation and government corruption. Haiti's Foreign Minister Bochit Edmond says there's still a crisis.
To me, it is very serious because we're talking about a democratically elected president that's under threat of being removed by some very, radical groups.
The Haitian government says they are focused on addressing protester concerns. Ahead of tomorrow's Vatican summit, the leaders of religious orders are begging forgiveness for failing to prevent abuse of children, nuns, and vulnerable adults. The superior generals are condemning twisted ideas of power and authority, saying the abuse of power and conscience by those in authority in the church, especially bishops, priests, and religious, is a story stretching back for decades of immense pain for those who have suffered. Just days ago, Pope Francis admitted for the first time that nuns had been sexually abused by bishops and priests for years. Now, 3 religious women are describing the suffering that they endured. Melissa Bell has their powerful stories.
And it was automatic, he wanted to go to the end. I was just like an object for him, and I had the feeling he did this a lot of time.
Lucy, not her real name, says she was abused by a priest. So do Liene Moreau and Laurence Poujade. None of their alleged abusers have ever faced trial. The Order of the Contemplative Sisters of St. John was founded here at Saint-Jodard by Father Marie-Dominique Philippe, who preached for the physical expression of affection. It was long after his death that the order recognized that he'd been guilty of sexual abuse.
But for years, there were rumors about other priests and other victims within the order.
Lucy was 18 years old and preparing to become an oblate, a layperson consecrated within the church, when she says the abuse began. It took Lucy 15 years to be able to talk about it. She then says the church wouldn't listen. In the criminal courts, the statute of limitations had expired. The Vatican now says it is investigating allegations made by several women against Lucy's alleged abuser. He was removed from the community 10 years ago, but even now, it is the strength of her faith that makes it so hard to take in.
He's a priest, he's a father, he's near God, he's like God, the Christ is living in him. He cannot do something like this. I think the worst was to talk. It broke me. It broke my body, in fact. It's like something is dead in me.
Liene was a novice when she was abused. The Order of St. John says that her alleged abuser, Father Marie-Olivier, is now being investigated by the Vatican. He declined our request for comment. Liene only began to put a word on what had happened to her 2 years ago, and by then it was too late to take to the criminal courts.
The psychological abuse was worse than the sexual abuse. It's my inner life. He took my dignity, my femininity, all that I was.
Liene says the abuse went on for 15 years. In the letters she shows us, Father Marie-Olivier suggests discretion, adding that his crazy love for her comes from Jesus. Laurence is a former nun who now heads a victims organization.
We are talking about victims who don't speak out. But what about those who went straight to psychiatric hospitals? What about those who mutilated themselves?
We did just try and ring the bell here at the Order of St. John, but no one would speak to us on camera. What matters, though, now is that the Order has recognized that there are victims other than those of the founder. Now, that acknowledgement came just after Pope Francis had lifted the lid on what he called sexual slavery within the Order of St. John. So what did the Pope's words mean for the victims?
Well, it was like a bomb.
It's a new beginning.
The pontiff's recognition may come late, but it does put words on a trauma that for so many had until now been unspeakable. Melissa Bell, Saint-Jodard.
Still to come on Currents News, a new study has experts puzzled. Find out what they're saying about the risk of heart attacks. And a rescue caught on camera, why Border Patrol agents had to jump into action to save a man's life. We'll be right back. Women between the ages of 35 and 54, listen up. Your health could be at risk. A new study shows women in that age group are more at risk of suffering a heart attack than they were 5 years ago. The results are a surprise to researchers who say they don't know why the surge appears to be affecting women more than men. And caught on camera, the moment when Border Patrol agents rescued a drowning man. The officials claim 3 people were attempting to enter the U.S. illegally, and when they tried to arrest them, they jumped into the water. When one of the men started having trouble, the agents jumped into action. The man was stabilized before being arrested. That is Currents News. I'm Liz Faublas. Thank you so much for joining us, because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.